Hi,
I have a question.
yes,
So I saw that my field history assignment changed. Like, instead of Amy Copeland, there's Samuel Bishop. But I think Samuel said that he was going to be at Red Lakes. So I don't know if he's going to talk to you, but if that's true, then it would just be me and Aaron.
well. I haven't heard that,
Okay.
and, someone won't be going there to Word Lakes,
Someone will be.
because I'm going to have 3 people with you.
Yeah. I don't know. I was gonna ask you about that, because I know like it's starting this Sunday. So,
I may, well, okay. Don't worry about it.
don't worry
No, I mean,
about it.
I will come up with a solution. You will not be going there with Aaron by yourself. That I can
Thank
tell you.
you.
That's not gonna happen.
Thank you.
I don't know what the solution is right now, but that won't happen, so you don't have to worry about
Thank
that. Okay.
you. So it's confusing, but it'll be okay.
It will be okay. Yes, thank you for telling me. That's, yes, everything is, everything will be okay.
Thank you.
What if you, I may switch you to drive to Old Time.
Where is Old?
It's on your way to Campton on Route 15. You get out past the Spencer Pawn Shop, and then you turn on Flat Mary Road, and it takes about 2 miles into the country countryside.
Diana was judging me.
And you'll either, and you can do, if I do that, you'll be doing children's church
Okay.
and with Miss Deaton.
Okay.
And, cause she's the Sunday school superintendent there, and you'll have help, either Jennifer Brown or Tiffany Early. I could say, which one do you want?
Oh.
But then Noah Stewart can drive out to Canyon Falls and take Aaron and one of the girls.
Okay. That would work.
Dr.
Yeah.
Reed, I have a question. How does choir as field ministry work?
When you go to a service or you do any choir singing, sing for your supper, you record that on the attendance sheet in field ministry.
Okay. I'm still like doing children's church at 5 Mile whenever I'm.
Yes, but I don't,
So,
Jay's been offering people 2 assignments, but I'm not thrilled with the idea because it's a headache for me.
Yeah,
I'm fine with whatever. But it's if you'd rather do it by yourself.
So if we're making choir field ministry, then that's that.
we're only doing like 4 or 5 Sundays. So.
It's not as big a deal as it once was a few years back, and if it looks like it's not really that big of an inconvenience, then I'll stop doing it. But there was a year or 2 back there when we first started to do choir during the semester in this way, that there really was no point in the students having another field ministry because they were never at that. Because the choir was out practically every weekend. I think that's in Zion National Choir. As we were driving north, our second day there.
So about the field ministry, you'll just decide and then I'll know in plenty of time for something.
Yes, it won't take me that long to figure out everything.
Thank you.
All right. Let me pull this up and we will begin. Okay, so we'll begin dealing with the new spoil system and reform-minded politicians around the turn of the century. The last century, not 20 years ago, 120 years ago. So let's have prayer. Father, we do thank you for your presence here, and we pray for your special in each of our lives, And we pray that you'll be in this class, help us as we continue to serve you, strengthening us as we understand your word and how you are working in each one of our lives. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. Here, now, we are at the 29th, so next time that we get together, will be the last day of the month, so, try and, submit an individual, and a chapter that, so I know when to, put you in for your oral report. I'll let you know right on the 1st of February, whatever, which person you're, going to be assigned to do. So that should all work out fine. If not, if I don't hear from you, I'll just assign you a chapter. Say, pick someone from this chapter and get back to me, in the next day or two. So that I know that you have someone that you're working on. All right, so we talked about here the Republicans. Republicans, here in the late 1800s, early 20th century, are divided into two camps. There were half-breeds and there were stalwarts. The half-breeds were led by James G. Blaine. And this is him. He was the main boss from the Republican Party in Maine. The stalwarts were the followers of Senator Roscoe Conkling of New York, who was a main rival for Teddy Roosevelt. Now, that gentleman right there, who seems to be embarrassed in that little cartoon, because his evil has been exposed. That is James Blaine there. Who was denied the presidency because of scandals having to do with civil service corruption. And this idea of civil service reform becomes a huge problem, or a problem that needed to be solved. Civil service corruption, not the reform was a problem, but corruption was a problem. And these guys here, the mugwumps, those were individuals who were promoting civil service reform, especially among the Eastern elites who were earnest reformers. And they are the heirs of what we think of today as the liberal Republicans. There aren't too many of them left. But the liberal Republicans used to be from New England, New York. There were a lot of liberal Republicans. And for the most part, they have disappeared. I don't know where they've gone, but they don't exist anymore. Now, newspaper reform. Newspaper, national magazines such as The Nation and Harper's Weekly were really involved with the whole process of reform. Thomas Nast, who is famous for creating the caricatures that we still use for political parties, elephants being for Republicans, and a donkey for the Democrats, but also wrote many other politically minded cartoons that really were made him famous. This is one of them. The Associated Press was also a new news service that sent newspapers, national politics and government news that helped to coordinate the news. Because before this, if you were a local newspaper, like here in Jackson, how are you going to get news from outside of Breathitt County to print in your newspaper? One way was to subscribe to a news service such as the Associated Press that would send news clippings to you. And this also created a national media for the first time. There's other services, not the Associated Press, but also Reuters. That's another one. And they pretty much compete for news service presentations.
Hello and welcome to another U.S. History Online lesson. Today we're going to continue with our unit on the Progressive Era by examining the muckrakers. So what is a muckraker? Well, a muckraker is a journalist. Could be someone writing an article, could be someone writing a book, could be someone taking pictures, could be someone drawing cartoons, and all in an effort to bring awareness to the dirt or the muck in society. Their goal is to bring it to the attention of public officials in government in hopes of trying to address some of these problems. And it's also bringing awareness to American people that may not know about some of these problems. The name muckraker was given to these journalists by President Theodore Roosevelt because they were always bringing up the muck in American society. In fact, you've already learned about one of the muckrakers, Thomas Nast, and his efforts to expose political corruption. The first muckraker that we're going to talk about today is Frank Norris. Frank Norris wrote a book called The Octopus in 1901, which is a fictional account about the struggle that farmers were engaged in with railroad monopolies during the age of industrialization. And it helps lead to the breakup of these monopolies, like what takes place in the Supreme Court case Northern Securities versus the US in 1904. Another influential muckraker was Lewis Hine. Lewis Hine was a photojournalist that was able to capture child labor. He was able to show kids working in coal mines and in factories, in every other working condition imaginable. This helped pave the way for child labor laws in different states and across the country as a whole. Ida Tarbell was a writer that was able to expose the ruthless business tactics of the Standard Oil Company in a series of articles in McClure's magazine published together in 1904. These articles were so damaging that they led to the Supreme Court case Standard Oil versus the US in 1911, the same Supreme Court case that would split up the Standard Oil Company of John Rockefeller. In his book, How the Other Half Lives, written in 1890, Danish immigrant Jacob Riis was able to expose the living conditions of the urban poor, focusing primarily on tenements, all in an effort to show the middle class, literally, how the other half lives. He was able to do this in photos and through story. And as a result, New York City passed building codes to promote safety and health. Last, and certainly not least, is the book The Jungle, written by Upton Sinclair in 1906. In the book, The Jungle, it investigates the dangerous working conditions and unsanitary procedures in the meatpacking industry of Chicago. This will lead to a couple of different pieces of legislation to reform the food industry. The first, coming in 1906, was the Pure Food and Drug Act, which required all food and medicines to have labels with ingredients, side effects, and other things. This act still exists and is regulated by the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration. And it also led the way for the Meat Inspection Act of 1906, which requires all meat products to be inspected by the government before, during, and after processing. So there you have it. This gives you a glimpse at just some of the work of some of the muckrakers during the Progressive era. We'll explore the works of these five more in class. Next time, we'll focus on social reforms, including what happens when you take away America's alcohol.
It becomes a happy place. Now, this is muckraking. Now, muckraking also became important because there was a novel in which there were these people down in the basement of this building raking muck. And they were muckrakers. That is the analogy that Teddy Roosevelt was using when he called them muckrakers. So these reformers and politicians both tried to manipulate the news during elections and to confront things in order to stir up opposition to anything that they oppose. And I just see this now, like Democrats never try and use anything that happened for political gain, but with this attack that killed 3 soldiers in the Middle East just last night, and Donald Trump has said that Biden is weak and that's a problem, and they're saying that he is pouncing on this in order to use it for political gain. Yes, he is. Why? Because he's trying to get reelected. That shouldn't be surprising that he's doing that. Now, what is the impetus for reform? The assassination of James A. Garfield, who, by the way, I think would have made an excellent president if he'd lived. James Garfield by Charles Guicciot, it's a Frenchman, last name, who was a disgruntled office seeker, shot him gutting on the train. He lived long enough that I think that if he was paralyzed and he had the bullet in him for almost 150 days until he died. They kept trying to find the bullet, cutting him open, searching for it with metal instruments that actually got him infected. I think if they would have just sewed him up, he might have been in a wheelchair, but he would have lived. Because I think it wasn't until after he died that it became obvious at his autopsy that the bullet was lodged against the spinal cord in a place where it could have healed up fine. He could have kept the bullet in him and everyone would have been happy. But nonetheless, he dies. And when he dies, this man, Chester A. Arthur, becomes president. Now, Arthur was a New York politician, an upper crust individual, and he supported civil service reform, even though he was the in charge even though he was in charge of the customs of New York. And if there was anyone who understood graft and how you had to get appointed as a politician, I mean, it was the person who was in charge of collecting customs in New York that was the first, not him, but was the first person to steal over $1 million from the federal government. Well, how would you like to have that as the claim, as your claim to fame? So that really is interesting. When president, he approved of the Pendleton Civil Service Act that established a merit system for appointment and promotion within the federal government employment system in order to ensure that people would not get their jobs out of patronage. Now, the limitation of the presidency during this period. The exalted memory of Lincoln caused people to have a greater respect for the presidency, but Congress will dominate most of the presidents during this period, and none of them will be elected to 2 successive terms. Now, restraint and respect for Congress was praised, and the government really wanted what you might want to call laissez-faire government, meant that most of the government employees and things really did not intervene. They just let the economy and society and whatever happen as it would. There was not a lot of government intervention during this time. Divided government hemmed in the president. Often, the Republican who controlled the White House, remember, they were not winning popular votes, but they were able to cobble together electoral votes in order to get elected. Congress was often in Democratic hands. So you often had a Democratic Congress and a Republican president, and that created a sense of limitation. The history of political corruption also is important here. Many people did not trust politicians very well. And then you have the disputed election of Rutherford B. Hayes, who, remember, at the end, we talked about this last semester, that he won the Electoral College by 1 vote because all of the disputed votes in the South, as well as 1 from Oregon, were all given to the Republicans by a committee set up in the government that had more Republicans on it than Democrats, and as a result, they accepted every one of those votes. And in exchange, in 1876, they agreed to do away with the Oh, actually, he was inaugurated in 1877, but, that he would do away with the, occupation of the South and Reconstruction and turn that over. Now, presidential moral leadership, an attempt to reclaim influence over American life. The Hayes family was very religious. They look very religious. There's some question as to whether or not we should, go back to having bearded presidents. I'm not sure which one was the last one to have a beard, but during the late 1800s, there was a lot of that. Mrs. Hayes had daily prayer meetings for the staff in the Red Room of the White House. And if you go to visit the White House on one of the public tours, you can go into the Red Room, and that is where I've been in the Red Room, but I wasn't necessarily sure which chair Mrs. Hayes sat on to have devotions, but nonetheless, that is important. She also supported temperance, and was known as Lemonade Lucy because she would not serve alcohol in the White House. Another thing about her is that she began the tradition of the Easter egg roll, which is sort of like an Easter egg party that's at the White House that is done every year. And it was pretty good. There was a Secret Service man dressed up in a bunny suit that kept President Biden from talking to the press at last year's, because the Easter bunny kept directing President Biden where to go. So that was rather interesting. Many dirty tricks and rough and tumble campaigning were added, especially in 1888. In 1888, you see here, one of the campaign slogans was about Grover Cleveland. Now, Grover Cleveland was a bachelor. He will get married while he is president. But he had a child out of wedlock. And during the campaign, this cartoon was published of Grover Cleveland's child yelling, "I want my papa," to embarrass him. Now, he admitted, after it came out, he admitted, yes, I do have this child out of wedlock, and that I've been taking care of it, and that the mother of the child was not behind the campaign to expose him. It was just a private matter, and he didn't talk about it. But they wanted to make it look like it was a terrible thing, and it probably could be, but Grover Cleveland is from upstate New York. Not upstate New York, northern Ohio, not far from Cleveland, actually. Because he was honest about his out of wedlock child, didn't deny it, came out and admitted it. That actually encouraged a lot of people to vote for him, and he won. Now, he will win 2 elections, but he's the only president so far, there might be another one soon, who has served 2 non-consecutive terms. And eventually, the presidencies were tried to be independent. They did use their veto power, and more presidents will use it on policy decisions. Many of the presidents during this period, though, will still believe that they should only veto legislation they thought was unconstitutional, not if they just disagreed with it. 2, they began to draft legislation and hand it over to representatives or senators who would introduce it for them. They hosted dinners at the White House for the very purpose of encouraging people to see things their way when it came to politics. They consulted with congressional leaders as though they were on a team. And they would start issuing executive orders. In fact, the numbering system that we still use for executive orders began during Lincoln's time and greatly overhauled the whole process of issuing executive orders during this period. Now, Congress, the House of Representatives lacked leadership and was incapable of doing the people's business. Speaker Thomas Reed brought the House to order starting in 1890, and he will be a powerful speaker. Became more beholden to lobbyists and special interests, and as it became better able to legislate. The Senate, known as a millionaires club, because back then, to be elected to the Senate meant that you were elected by the state legislatures, and many times they would bribe their way in. So the senators were usually wealthy, businessmen, big donors, people loyal to the party, and their state. Instituted new rules to ensure party discipline in the Senate, and will begin to have what we now have, organization where the Republicans and the Democrats will begin electing leadership positions in the House in addition to the Speaker. Now, the war of wealth, the economy in the 1890s. America's monetary policy was bimetallism and a distrust of paper money. So they believed in having both silver and gold coins, and they were worth varying amounts based on the size of the coin. So a silver dollar was to have how much worth of silver in it? $1 worth, very good. And a $20 gold piece would have how much value of gold in it? $20, very good. These are not hard questions. $20. We did not issue paper, well, we did issue paper money during the Civil War, but Americans did not want paper money. They liked gold coins, and there were, I don't know what, if there was, money was worth a lot more then. When they started issuing paper money, it's because they wanted bigger denominations of money. Like hundreds, 500s, thousands, 10,000s, $50,000 bills were made. But I don't think there was ever more than a $20 gold piece, maybe a $50 gold piece. If I went home to my mom's house and went through my coin collection, I know that I have some of these. I know I have at least one $20 gold piece. I don't have it with me here that I could use as a souvenir, but silver dollars, quarters were also made of silver, dimes were made of silver during this period too. During the 1870s, the issue of using greenbacks or paper money not redeemable for gold was debated at the federal level. Coinage of 1883 ended the minting of silver dollars and put America on the gold standard. And one of the things that is interesting is that one of the main issues in presidential campaigns in the late 1800s was whether we were going to be on the silver standard for our economy or the gold standard for our economy. And today it's like, who cares? But that was a huge issue in that time. The Bland-Alson Act of 1878 began mining silver, minting with silver again. Out in Nevada at Carson City, that was one of the main places for minting silver dollars. In 1890, solved the issue of gold versus silver money as one of the main issues in the presidential campaign. Unfortunately, the Depression of 1893 created an issue for the gold standard. And in some ways, many progressives, Midwesterners, more working class Democrats did not like the idea of the gold standard. William Jennings Bryan made his famous speech about America worshiping a cross of gold at the Democratic Convention when he was only 35 years of age. And then he was eventually nominated for president when he was only 37. definitely anti-gold. Now, a 4-year depression that was the worst in the century caused by structural imbalances in the economy. First, the failure of the Philadelphia and Reading Railroad caused the economy to contract, get smaller. And when the economy gets smaller, that means your money goes into a deflationary set. Now, in one sense, if there is a problem of deflation, your money's actually worth more. And prices drop. But also, anyone who's expecting money on interest, like the banks would require you to pay them to keep your money in the bank. Instead of them giving you interest, they would deduct money every month in order to have your money in the bank account, because your money is becoming worth less every month instead of being worth than it was before. Now, the sell-off of the New York Stock Exchange converted wealth to gold, and 93 railroads, 600 banks, and 15,000 businesses failed during this depression. That's a terrible economic slowdown. This was blamed on the silver issue, and the Sherman Silver Purchase Act was repealed. J.P. Morgan helped save the gold standard at the height of the crisis. The depression deepened and created distrust in the minds of many unemployed. Militant labor strikes erupted all around the country. Some of the most important were in the coal mines, which we talked about last semester, and at the Pullman Sleeping Car Company. Businessmen called on the government for action to restore order. The cause of poverty was reassessed. Sin and bad choices gave way to economic criticism, and social gospel gained popularity all throughout the country. The Commonwealth Army of Christ marched on Washington and called for federal intervention. Jacob Cox, leader of this movement, was arrested for trespassing on Capitol grounds, and the army was used to disperse this army of marchers with clubs and violence and force. The army sent them on their way. In 1894, the Republican Party won one of the largest electoral victory in history. It gained 140 seats in the House. Even the immigrants were cutting ties with the Democratic Party because of the economic slowdown. That was the biggest gain in one election cycle of any party ever in the history of congressional politics. And this economic slowdown will create a populist uprising. First of all, the farmers. Once again, Little House is a good illustration. Do you remember the episode where they go to Chicago in order to go to the Grange Convention, and Mary is hoping to meet with her boyfriend who has another girlfriend who she doesn't know about, John Jr. Now, Paul is trying to become a part of the Grange and dealing with the railroads. And eventually, when they have to leave Walnut Grove in order to go to Winoka at the end of season 4, and the town nearly dies, that has to do partly with the impact of the railroads fighting regulation and the Grange. Now, the Grange, which you see Paul going to Chicago to the party, the Grange was a farm cooperative formed in 1870s. And Grange lodges became political. So at first they were supposed to be sort of like a union for farmers, a cooperative for farmers, but they will eventually become very political and very biased. And they had meeting houses that could be used for many different purposes, but they also became political, just like unions can today. Membership will fall after prosperity returns. Another one of these groups is the National Farmers Alliance and Industrial Union. This will begin in 1889. Charles Ingalls, to my knowledge, never goes to a meeting of this organization. Several regional alliances merged to form the National Farmers Alliance and Industrial Union. This became a movement in Ocala, Florida in 1890. In the South, the Democratic Party was used. In the Plains, the New People's Party was used to gain control of the third party in the West. Nebraska, Kansas, and places like that, where progressivism with the farmers was a big deal. The People's Party became known as the Populists, adopted the Ocala demands at the 1892 convention, attracted labor votes with an 8-hour workday and restrictions on immigration, and they nominated James B. Weaver for president and James Field for vice president. Many of these populists, and I'm going to change that, it's not 1992. In 1892, there is an election in 1892, but that's not it. Tried to gain back black votes in the South by aligning with the Colored Farmers National Alliance and Cooperative Union. Ended as a third-party movement in 1892 after it became obvious that they weren't getting anywhere. Many of them will join the Democratic Party after that, and that's where William Jennings Bryan will make his way into the Democratic Party. Prevalent in Western Republicans, like in California, Arizona, Utah, Nevada, fractured the Democratic Party and made it easy to take over and develop. Now, here we go. Here is, there's William Jennings Bryan, a fiery young orator. You know, I don't know when that picture was taken, but I mean, he is involved in politics for a long time. Because when he first ran for president, obviously he was only 37. And he will be the Democratic nominee 3 times. He is hoping to be renominated again in 1920. Now, by that time, he was old. And he unfortunately got a case of the deads. And that prevented him from running in 1920. But he was really hoping that he would make a comeback in politics in the 20s. Now, this is it. The Cross of Gold speech was given by William Jennings Bryan in the 1896 Democratic Convention. And the Democrats could not decide who they wanted to be their nominee. And after he made this speech, this guy from Nebraska just encouraged them all to vote for him. 1896 and 1900, he is the nominee. And then he's the nominee again sometime later. Not sure exactly when, but he's also the nominee in like 1908 or something like that. The Republican Party will nominate William McKinley, this gentleman right here, from Ohio, who refused to leave his home to campaign. His wife was ill and he wouldn't leave her. So he would give his speeches on the front porch of his house. And the news media came to cover his speeches that he gave there on his front porch. And he will eventually be elected. He will be elected president. Mount McKinley in Alaska was named for him, not while he was president, but even before, when he was just a Republican nominee for president. The People's Party offered a fusion ticket with the Democrats. The campaign of 1896 saw Bryan barnstorm the country. He went everywhere and anywhere. He preached and spoke in every town that would have it. McKinley, as I mentioned, campaigned from the front porch and used the media to reach people. McKinley won handily. A rematch in 1900 resulted in an easy McKinley victory. Therefore, he is elected.
Mr. Beat presents Presidential Elections in American History. The 28th presidential election in American history took place on November 3rd, 1896. Turnout was high, and people were saying things like, "This is the most important election ever." Yeah, right, as if they don't say that every election. Grover Cleveland's second term didn't go so well. For most of it, the country had been stuck in a severe economic depression. And while the populist movement was at its peak, with poor people pointing fingers at, quote, the man, everybody seemed to be losing money during this time, even the rich. The Republicans rallied behind a new face on the national scene, William McKinley, the former governor of Ohio. They nominated Garrett Hobart as his running mate, a former New Jersey legislator. The Democratic Party had generally shifted away from Cleveland to a more, quote, free silver monetary policy, calling for inflation to help ease the economic crisis. In fact, they had adopted several of the populist ideas. At first, there was no obvious successor to Cleveland, and several candidates emerged, like old Silver Dick himself, Richard P. Bland, the former U.S. representative from Missouri. However, soon, another dude stood out quite a bit, mostly for his incredibly awesome speeches. 36-year-old William Jennings Bryan, a former U.S. representative and lawyer from Nebraska, gave his famous Cross of Gold speech at the Democratic National Convention. In the speech, he sounded very much like a populist, passionately attacking big city corporations in the gold standard, while calling for government relief for farmers and others hurt by the Depression. His speech was so dramatic that after he was done, some delegates carried him on their shoulders out of the room as if he was the quarterback who had just scored the winning touchdown. Needless to say, Bryan got the nomination. The Democrats nominated Arthur Sewell, a shipbuilder from Maine, to be his running mate. The Populist Party also endorsed William Jennings Bryan, since his party basically co-opted their ideas, and so did the newly formed Silver Party. So it was quite a fusionist election. Meanwhile, Democrats who were not on board with the Free Silver movement formed their own political party called the National Democratic Party, also known as Gold Democrats because they supported the gold standard. They were more aligned with Cleveland and would absolutely not support Bryan. They met in August and nominated John Palmer, a U.S. Senator from Illinois, for president, and Simon Buckner, the former governor of Kentucky, for vice president. Palmer was 79 years old and Buckner 73. Making the two the oldest combined presidential ticket in American history. The Prohibition Party split in two for this election. Some wanted to go beyond just the Prohibition issue, and so they went off and formed a different Prohibition Party. So basically, the Prohibition Party had two tickets. Joshua Levering and Hale Johnson forming the traditional single-issue ticket, and Charles Bentley and James Southgate forming the more broad-based issues ticket. Let's get real here. McKinley and Bryan were the only ones who stood a chance. And so, this became a battle of the Williams. Unlike any presidential candidate before him, Bryan crisscrossed the country to campaign. He traveled 18,000 miles in 3 months. In just 100 days, he gave over 500 speeches. On one of those days, while he was in St. Louis, he gave 36 speeches in 1 day. By doing this, of course, he reached millions of people, but he didn't get much sleep and often lost his voice. He did draw huge crowds wherever he went, explaining in a hoarse voice that he left his real voice at the previous places he visited to keep firing up the people. Meanwhile, William McKinley mostly just stayed home. He didn't have to crisscross the country, as his buddy Mark Hanna did all the work for him and brought the people to McKinley's front porch. Hanna orchestrated a masterful campaign that was successful at raising millions of dollars, much more than Brian could raise. In fact, Hanna literally invented a new form of campaign financing that has been the norm ever since. He went straight to businesses to get donations, making propositions. The McKinley campaign was successful at making many businesses fear a Brian presidency. I probably should mention that Utah can now participate in this election because they were now a state. Congratulations, Utah. And here are the results. William McKinley won, becoming the 25th president in American history. He received 271 electoral votes and 51% of the popular vote. He did particularly well in the East and Northeast. William Jennings Bryan received 176 electoral votes and 46.7% of the popular vote. He particularly did well with farmers in the South, West, and Midwest. John Palmer finished third with just under 1% of the popular vote. Joshua Levering finished fourth, just over 3,000 votes behind Palmer. Garrett Hobart became the 24th vice president in American history. While Bryan's defeat was a blow to populist momentum, many of the ideas brought into the mainstream during his campaign would stick around long after this election. I'll see you for the next election, buddy.
So, and this particular, Mr. Beat guy, he has a video for every presidential election, and some of them are pretty straightforward, and some of them get pretty complicated. And I think he does a pretty good job with them. All right. Okay. Now, here we are in our last section here, near the end of these units. And just taking a look at our we have this area here, 65-100, is talking about the expansion of the United States as it relations to empire and building the country and how that takes place. Now, let me, there we go. Here is someone building a wall. There are big issues about this right now. And it does appear to me as though President Biden's goal is to let as many illegal immigrants into the country as possible, because even where there are barriers, he's removing them on the basis that the razor wire on the border might cut some of the illegal immigrants as they try and enter the country, and that would be unkind. Well, one of the ways they can avoid getting cut, because I have never been cut by razor wire, because I see it, I stay away. It is not our responsibility to ensure that that it's convenient and safe for people to come illegally to the country. But anyway, it was thought that America would have a sense of isolationism. That will develop after the Civil War and really becomes a big deal at the turn of the century politics. There was a feeling by most Americans, that the oceans provided free security, that an enemy could not come and invade America because they'd have to come across the ocean to do it. And I will say this, that there were lots of people who felt that 9/11 shook their ability to believe in American safety. I remember preaching at a church the Sunday after 9/11 here in Eastern Kentucky at the Ezel Presbyterian Church. And one of the members there, who was older, an older lady, said just that to me, that you would think that the oceans would protect us. and that was a general thought by many people, that would happen. Now, Americans, developed American isolationism encouraged the belief that God anointed the United States to be a city upon a hill, playing a special role in the world, to be a moral influence and guide throughout the world. And that phrase, a city on a hill, was written by the early Puritans who came to Massachusetts. And other politicians have used that phrase. Thomas Paine's Common Sense, George Washington's Farewell Address, and the Monroe Doctrine all discouraged foreign entanglements, that we should not set up permanent alliances with foreign countries. And the United States had never done that, signed an alliance with any country after we did with France in order to become independent, until the development of NATO after World War II. Because we never wanted to get ourselves in a situation where we were obligated to fight in a war because our ally was involved in a conflict that was not in our strategic interest. And so there was a movement to expand our influence around the world, but do it in a way that protected ourselves. And so when we come back Wednesday, we're going to talk more about expansionism and how that comes about, why we expand, and what the issues are. And here, here is a map of the expansion of the United States. This is the original part that we got from England. The Louisiana Purchase, Texas, the land we get from Mexico, Oregon, that we buy from England, Great Britain, and then Florida. Which Florida originally is all of this land here too. Southern Mississippi and Alabama, all the way to the Mississippi River. So we buy this, I think in 1820. So anyway, that we will talk about how all that comes about and how we develop into the country that we are today. But yes, and also this piece of land here. We buy that from Mexico later, called the Gadsden Purchase, so that we could put a railroad across the Southwest, either to San Diego or to Los Angeles, but we wanted to use some of this land, so we bought that from Arizona and added it to Arizona and New Mexico after the war was over. That wasn't originally ceded to us during the Mexican War. So, all right, so we'll see you on Wednesday, and yes. Thank you. We have 6 sessions left. Before I leave. For Florida.
And when is that?
The 13th, February 13th.
Okay.
So the 12th, that Monday, we still have class, and then I'll have the test set up that you can take it online then anytime, 14th, 15th, 16th. That's convenient for you.
Sounds good.
All right, yep.